morning, friends. And my sincere apologies that I came late because I was searching in the other IIC where this, I was looking probably there will be some smoke coming, so I know this is something to do with tobacco. But there was no smoke and therefore there was no fire, and then I had to come here, firefighting to come here and attend this program. So I'm sorry for that. So I'm really impressed because my dear friend and one of the most distinguished parliamentarian and a very learned man is here, Raju. So I think he'll speak, so I don't have anything more to say, more than what he's going to say. And my very distinguished friend and who was my colleague in the government, Aruna Sharma ji, whom I worked with. So she is a woman of steel as well as she knows IT, so I think she's the one who will contribute even better. And of course, he being a very trained professional in health matters, I think they are the right people to speak. So I am not going to really say anything. I have to go for some other programs as well. So I thought I will seek permission from the chair and speak first. So, and as you can see, after their speaking, I have nothing else to add. So I am also speaking to begin with. Thank you for organizing the event through Policy Circle, because normally the challenge of policy is it moves always in circles. And therefore nobody knows what the policy is because it is still going into the rounds and rounds and circles and circles. I have dealt with policy making, policy implementation for a fairly long time. This is my 26th year in the parliament, and the last one I'm going to quit and join Raju in pursuit of academics. I've become a chancellor of university. I'm also now the visiting professor in London School of Economics, so I would be doing that. But I've seen in policy, the biggest problem is I had 11 cabinet positions, so different levels of policy I've seen. The problem is, first, whenever you want to make a policy, who decides what the policy should be? One of the big problem in policy is that because we have a sovereign responsibility as a government to make policies. In fact, the basic job of government, and actually for that matter even parliament, is to make policies. Of course, unfortunately, the parliaments don't make policies. This is one of the reforms that we must bring into the parliament, is that we have a right to choose a government, technically, because the majority in the parliament only forms the executive. Also, we have a right, and particularly in the standing committees, we actually really do a lot of evaluation as well as so-called grilling of the government, the executive. But still, policy making should be, in my opinion, along with the executive, should also be the responsibility of the legislature, because they represent the people directly. So they will have the understanding about what are the possibilities of the policy getting into some roadblocks, or for that matter, what are the concerns of the people that should be reflected in the policy to begin with. In fact, we have always seen that the best policy that can be implemented is a policy which is acceptable to the people at large. And we have seen there are some state governments who have prohibition. They don't allow the consumption of liquor. I don't know whether the consumption has gone down or has increased in those states. But because people are not willing to accept that, because they have a habit of drinking, so they will continue to drink. So this is one of the challenge of policy, is that when you make policy, you should take into consideration the people's priorities, interests. Another good example is that the countries where the environmental policies are implemented the most are the countries where the environmental awareness is the highest. So in the absence of awareness, there is no acceptance, there is no some receptivity to the ideas that are enshrined into the policies. So policy making is a very complex exercise, and therefore has to be done with a lot of caution and care. And one of the best way to do that is to have consultation. That's the best way to come out with the best policy that you can actually finally implement and get all the stakeholders on board. And if you do that, there's a very good chance that you'll actually succeed in implementing the policy. That's my experience of so many years of different. So this is one. And I've done that always, what I just said. But second part, and the important part is that any time you bring out with regulation, the regulation can be successful only when, as I said, that people themselves are made aware about the consequences of not following a regulation. Say in case of tobacco, I don't smoke, so I don't have any experience of the ill effects of tobacco. No, neither I chew the tobacco. But if you create an awareness that tobacco consumption has very adverse effect on health, it might help. Not always. For example, now there's a regulation all over the world, virtually, that you say that tobacco is injurious to health. But it has been so widely used that people think this must be also the part of the brand name of that tobacco company. Because it is used all the time. Tobacco is injurious to health. So they think ITC, injurious to health, means it must be part of the credo, lego of the company itself. So this is what happens normally. So you cannot just wash away the hands and by say that I have given you warning, now it's an informed choice. Yes and no. Yes, because now you know and there is a lot of stuff is going on. But at the same time, working with people, making them understand at a very young age. When I joined a college, my friend said, let's go and smoke. I said, why? He said, now we are in college. So as if my right to now smoke because I'm in the college, just to prove the point that I have graduated into that level. So that is how the people think that they must do it. Like people sometimes you drink because it's a so-called social drinking. So you drink not because you want to drink, but because otherwise you'll be ostracized by the community that you don't drink. That means you are inferior. So smoking and the tobacco consumption, that is what you are discussing from the regulation perspective, is something essentially can succeed only and only when you create adequate awareness about the consequences of, adverse consequences of consumption. In fact, I was a Commerce Industry Minister, I was responsible for Tobacco Board. And in the Tobacco Board, we always have this challenging situation every few years when, because to the international convention, we want to control the growing of tobacco itself. In a way, it's right. Because if you don't grow, how will people consume? But we tend to forget that the consumption is still there and there is an appetite to consume that, then people will find a way and it might be even clandestinely or rightly imported into the country. So the tobacco farmers will lose out, but consumption still can go up. So that's why I was saying we have to have a proper trade-off between such very complex issues. And one thing, therefore, in this regulation, which I am honestly speaking not very well conversant with, I have not studied it adequately, I know a little bit of broad contours of it, but I feel that one of the essence of any regulation that can be implemented over a period of time is to have a proper understanding. In fact, we should think, again that will become a problem after some time, that's the problem, that if we overuse any particular communication channel, after some time people get insensitive to that. So they don't accept that as a communication. So suppose, for example, for years we are saying water consumption, water use is very important. So after some time people are saying, oh, that is something part of the everyday morning I have to hear it and forget it. So keep changing, like what a Niti Aayog can really look at, is to engage with the stakeholder, one part, but also ensure that the communication reaches out to the audience in a way that they will be able to comprehend the consequences of not following the communication in a right manner. So that is something which is extremely important. So I think we have one very important challenge, not only in India, but all over the world, that on one side, there is now enough irrefutable evidence available about what happens if you consume tobacco beyond a particular level and quantity. That's proven beyond doubt. At the same time, that has not reduced the consumption. So just imagine. Now, there are anti-drug agencies all over the world. The US always, not only now they realize that they have to go to the source. They first went down to Colombia, so all the Colombian drug cartels came to Mexico, so closer to the border. So they went out, like right now the Russia started a war with Ukraine saying that the NATO is coming closer to me. So those two countries, Sweden and Finland, were never part of NATO, even during the worst of the Cold War, they are now joined NATO. So always by going after them, so we have to find out very complex, it's a human mind issue. You can bring down the consumption, you can actually attack all this when the mind changes. And that's a very complex issue. Mindset change is something which is not going to happen in a hurry, but will have to be done in an appropriate manner. And there's other way that you can do it is, if not eliminate it completely, at least reduce the adverse impact to a great extent possible. And that may be doable. This is possible. by changing the way the tobacco is processed, tobacco is consumed, tobacco is available in different products, because cigarette is not just the only way that you can use tobacco. There are many other ways that it happens. And particularly, we have seen the so-called pan masalas have come up over a period of time. And there are, I don't want to say, one of the senior leader in India used to put tobacco in his mouth. Then he has suffered hugely because of that. So it always happens. And the best way to therefore address this issue is to work in this complex ecosystem with all the stakeholders, and also keep coming out with imaginative communication to engage with the community at large. And that's the best way to do it. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me. Probably you wanted, in all the stakeholders, one of the non-smoker as a stakeholder, right? So that's what I'm here. So I'm thank you for that. And I really congratulate the organizers for taking this initiative, and such three distinguished stalwarts, as well as I can see many more in the audience, will enrich the deliberations as we go along. Thank you very much.